Bob Greenyer is one of the founding members of the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. Most people who've been following the LENR story are familiar with Bob and his work and the work of the MFMP, and his topic today will be fanning the flames of the new fire.
On to the presentation I'm going to do today. It's in two sections. One, a short presentation called Fanning the New Fire, and the second will be a catalyst to do that. So my name is Bob Greenyer, and I'm from the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. And just for those people that are seeing this video for the first time, possibly not the people on the call, but others that may see it on YouTube later. What are we? We're a growing collaboration of organizations and individuals, and our primary goal since the beginning is to show the world that there is a practical primary energy source that we've always called the new fire. How do we work? We leverage the connected power of the internet to do what we call live open science, not-for-profit organization funded by interested followers, and our followers are part of the process. They analyze and challenge us and inform us, and we call that the social multiplier. We remain strongly independent, and we leverage the technical capabilities of the international networks of our volunteer members. There's some milestones there. I won't go into them, but they're there for people who are looking at the video in the future. Our greatest milestone, I think, other than seeing 12.5% on the 12th of the 12th of the 12th in Celani's wire, was donations of about $10,000 in 7 days that enabled us to go and see Francesco Piantelli, having tried to see him for 2 years. And the insight that we gained during that time and to understand the measure of this formidable man has really helped us understand at least from many aspects, what the history is in this science and how things came to be. Actually, it's funny because Vladimir's point is it relates to Piantelli's original patent application from 27th of the 1st, 1994, energy generation and generator by means of anharmonic stimulated fusion. You can read the title there, but I think it relates quite nicely. And he says that when we were with him, that you need to shock it. And just as a point of interest for Vladimir, the cell that everyone's seen but doesn't quite know how it works, you can put a conduction through the core, if that helps things. Plans for the future is to further study Celani wire and the gamma evidence we saw previously. We've been waiting for about half a year for some wires to do that. But anyway, everything else is set up and ready to go. And in collaboration with other groups, including supporting by providing materials to them, and we'd like a coordinated effort to evaluate powder technology. We believe that if we produce training materials of how to practically do things, that helps people to get up to speed. And with groups like University of Missouri and the Open Power Foundation, we were able to refer back to previous videos on countless occasions when they needed to know how to make something that we had made in the past. We didn't have to explain it in text, we just said, go and look at this video. So it's a very, very valuable tool, and I hope many people are benefiting out there. It's a video culture now. We'd like to develop an open power control and data acquisition system for wide-scale experimentation. And I believe that that same system would end up being a basic reactor control unit for home build and other uses. In these kind of aspects, we're in line with the Energy 2 Society, and we hope and expect that we'll have good collaboration with them moving forward. And if possible, we'll develop an open reactor platform, either from the point of view that you know what to do, or from the point of view that you can make one, but it's not necessarily patent-free. But anyway, there will be an open platform that you'll know how it works. That's kind of an ambition. So I guess what I'm asking for is to be a fan rather than a choke. to fan the new fire. So I put together this little chart here. I don't know if can you see my mouse here? Can you see my mouse?
Yes.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay. So the assumption is that everyone shares their intent to start out with, and if they have a positive outcome and they've still got will and they've still got money, they'll go back to share again. If they can't, they look for a sponsor, and if they can't get a sponsor, they quit. If they can get a sponsor and the sponsor's open, they go back and share. If the sponsor's not open, they go dark. If they get a positive result first off and they're open, they'll share. And if they get a positive result and they're not open, they'll close. And the concept is copy left. Everything moves to the left is copy left, i.e. everyone gets to put it into their starting point. Copy right it's tending to lose information, either knowledge of failures, which are very important, or knowledge of successes and how those successes came about. They're either quitted out or they're closed out. And one of our greatest disappointments was the fact that we couldn't take our cooperation with Piantelli to its logical conclusion of replicating independently his reactor. And that was principally, quite likely due to investor support closing out that option for us, which was a great shame. Anyway, moving on. Catalyst. Okay, so having talked about this concept of copy left, copy right, giving back to the community so that it can do more with the information, it's starting from a higher point on the knowledge tree. Starting off, what are we talking about here for people that are new to LENR? Chemical, you're not going to get more than sort of around about 5 electron volts from burning carbon, oxidizing carbon. Fusion, deuterium, tritium, going to helium plus neutron. You're getting about 15 mega electron volts thereabout. You can see the kind of scale of difference in energy here. Lugana came about, which was the first kind of inspirational moment, really, which we could connect with as a replication community for high power research. And the interesting thing here is I might want to come back to 2 things. One is the whole length of reactor is glowing. And 2, that at the end of the reaction cycle, it seemed to be still trending up. Obviously, the big reveal was major shifts in nickel and lithium isotopes. Particularly, let's just hold this number 98.7 here in nickel. And that's the point that I want to discuss in the rest of this presentation. So where is the energy coming from? Big question. Well, obviously we'd all in this community agree that it's coming from some form of low energy nuclear reactions. That's sort of Gullström, University of Uppsala, tends towards the 7 lithium plus an isotope of nickel going to 6 lithium and the sequential number higher of nickel. Neutron stripping. Or, as is in the Cook-Rossi paper, proton combines with 7 lithium, giving 2 heliums, yielding about 17 mega electron volts. So where are we getting this proton from? Well, one potential option is, would it work? As I understand it, the first fusion predicted fusion experiment in the 1920s, which was done in the 1930s, was protons into lithium. And Unified Gravity Corporation took this to the max over nearly a decade or so of experiments. And they have one of the lengthiest patents out there. If you wish to read it, you're a better man than I, but it's very long. And it talks about something under 225 electron volts being the sweet spot of tunneling into lithium. And maybe this ties in also to what Domenko was saying about, the tunneling energies. I don't know. It's a conversation I might need to have with him. Piantelli would argue that the accelerated protons come from these anharmonic oscillation kind of interactions, and you'll need to have the full resolution of this presentation to understand it. But basically over here on the right, you've got metal clusters of specific size. They allow a plasmon configuration on the surface that allows H minus to come in, and that gets drawn in as a under his understanding of kind of like a composite particle, like a muon, a heavy electron type thing. And it either gets pulled into the nucleus or it gets ejected over here to interact with the secondary material. Because he's running in a gaseous environment, he needs to keep the pressure low, otherwise the ejected protons decay to hydrogen and then they get not able to stimulate further reactions. Are the transmutations unique? Well, no, you see them all over the place. There's a couple of examples here. Takahashi, Master Matteo Celani, Mitsubishi Heavy Industries even have a patent on the fact that they can do transmutations. They do tend to be to smaller atoms, so you know, that's interesting of itself. But if you look at the Cook-Rossi paper, it is arguing that maybe it is this stepwise progression using proton and decay, and that provenance could be all the way back to the work from Ficcardi and Piantelli. And I've written a spreadsheet that describes most of those kind of reactions. The interesting thing is here, and this is we're getting into the meat of what I want to say in the next few minutes. Rossi's been distancing himself from the 62 nickel percentage in the ash. In the Huffington Post interview, which if you search for it or you go to ECAT World, you'll find it. He was asked, what do you believe is the best theoretical explanation? And he goes into go and look at the Cook-Rossi paper, and it describes the kind of Piantelli type reactions and the proton 7 lithium interactions. And then he says the shift of lithium isotopes has been reconciled with our understanding of the process, although the shift of nickel isotopes has not. And then he makes up a kind of reason why that might be, and more analysis is under the way. So then we see in his own blog, he's saying that, you know, I concluded that the 0.2 ash sample of the charge was not representative of the whole charge, as you can see in the Cook-Rossi paper. Okay, so what's going on here? Let's go back to where the first time we saw nickel 62, and it was in his original patent, the Italian one, which then became a world patent, or an application in that case, and was rejected. It was mentioned that the 62 nickel converted into a stable copper, and that's why it was chosen through this addition of proton. But, you know, why would it not have another proton and then go through another reaction chain? I don't know. So I'm looking at the Cook-Rossi paper, page 9, and it's saying the dramatic increase in 62 nickel must therefore be explained through a different mechanism without implying transmutations for which there is no empirical evidence. And it's interesting to say that because we didn't see any, and I'll come on to this later, but we didn't see any in our experiments that were independently double-blind tested, and neither did Zhongsheng Zhang. So, and Cook-Rossi paper, page 10, there's an explanation given for maybe how this would occur, surface accretion of 62 nickel as a result of 61 nickel plus proton reactions. And, you know, 61 nickel is the only stable nickel isotope with a non-zero spin. So, you know, that's interesting of itself. And he goes into that, the fact that 7 lithium is also a non-zero spin, and they're both 302 minus. And so that is interesting, but it's a vanishingly small percentage of natural nickel. I don't know, it's something like 1% is 61. So I'm not convinced on that argument. And then the Cook-Rossi paper, page 9, this is interesting. Now, I'm changing tack here, and I just wanted to talk about where the location of the nickel was that came up with this 62 figure, the very high percentage of 62 nickel. At the time of sampling, after 1 month of operation, nickel was found to be encrusted on the internal surface of the reactor, from which a 2 milligram sample of ash was obtained. We need to hold that in mind. You've got the inside surface of the reactor. Now, there's lots been said about who did what and when and how the extraction has occurred. But put that to one side. This has come after those discussions. And this is Cook and Rossi getting together and talking about where the ash came from. Okay? And this predominantly 62 nickel apparently came from an incrustation on the inside of the reactor. Now, can you remember, if you step back to the glowing reactor, the whole thing was glowing. Now, what we found in the bang experiment, which was, it was a piece of serendipity, we had an exploding reactor right at the peak temperature. So it was a frozen moment in time. And what we saw for the first time was this sintered rod of material, okay, which was predominantly the Vale T255 material sintered together. But can you see the white chunks of alumina in there, which have the silvery aluminium, as it turns out, aluminium and lithium coating on there? There doesn't really appear to be almost any nickel on the inside of the reactor. That's interesting. That's really interesting. Now, one thing we also found out is that the lithium aluminium is also dissolving about 3 to 4% nickel into it. So it's actually able to kind of like etch away the nickel. And if you saw some of the photos of some of Alan's experiments where he used a pure nickel sheath to line the alumina reactor, the lithium actually ate that away. Okay, so it's able to dissolve. Let's go back to the original patent again, okay, from Rossi. What are we looking at here? Well, there's this diagram, and it's talking about powder being in there, but there's this paragraph 25 here, and it's saying nickel is coated in a copper tube 100. It's coated. It's not a lump of powder, it's coated. And then what do you have here? That kind of bent thing. It's saying, including a heating electrical resistance. That's 101. That little bent thing is the heating electrical resistance. Okay. It looks a hell of a lot like a tungsten melting vapor deposition boat. Able to go to 3422, could be a heater, it's in cell. Could you be putting your nickel that you want to coat on the inside of a tube that may be prepared with a vacuum? Why would you want to do that? Well, okay, so if your nickel is more stable and less breaking down than your lithium and your hydrogen, obviously they're going to be gas or liquid. You would want that nickel in direct contact with the means of extraction of the heat. Now step back again in your mind to the dog bone reactor. The dog bone reactor is glowing along its entire length. No one's had that. We don't have that. Why? Because we've got our fuel right stuck in the middle. When we upend our reactors to put the fuel in, it's quite difficult to get it in the right place. And if you looked at the photos that I shared of the Padua, which ran for nearly 2 weeks after running at Me 356, we had all the aluminium up at one end. And the reason is because lithium aluminium hydride is so light. It's so light, as you're tapping it into the reactor, it just gets in the wrong place. It comes to the top, it just gets everything, all the heavy stuff, the nickel falls to the bottom. So that's not really ideal, but ideal would be to coat it on the inside. Now we know we can do this because we've been doing it by accident with Chilani cells. We've been, oops, we got a vacuum and we put the power on, and now we have a very nice piece of quartz or borosilicate glass that now has a copper mirror on it, or copper nickel mirror on it. So that's the kind of process you would use. So we could actually use a Chilani cell to, you know, vapor deposit onto the cell. So I just want to also talk about another thing that we saw at Piantel is he has this $1 million machine, and it's specifically designed to vapor deposit. Okay, and the reason is, and it's in his patent, you need cluster sizes, and this goes back to Debenko's talk. You need cluster sizes that have above a certain level of atoms and below a certain level of atoms, and you need to be they need to be clean. So, you know, it kind of makes sense. It kind of makes sense, this vapor deposition. Okay, so if you actually look at this diagram again, you've got the hydrogen bottle up here. It's putting the hydrogen in here, and it's the hydrogen that's coming in here is actually hitting this tungsten boat, which is kind of how you disassociate hydrogen, and maybe that's kind of how it worked the first ones.
Excuse me, Bob.
Yeah.
We need to wrap up in a few more minutes.
Okay, I'm nearly done.
Great.
I've got the big reveal coming. Okay, so lithium mobility, it gets everywhere. If you've been doing this, and I'm sure Brian will tell you, if you've got free lithium in there, it gets everywhere. The surface tension and low mass ensures this. Even if there's some vapor, some will be liquid, and the supercritical water, it's there. You can read it later, just running through this quickly. Thermal events would spread the lithium. So you might want to pre-process your material so that it was supersaturated with nickel, like 3 to 4 or 5% or whatever we saw in the bang, so that when it's in the reactor, it doesn't try and etch away this vapor deposited nickel. We need nickel. We need 62 nickel. We did not see any isotopic shift, neither did Songzheng Yang, and Alexander Parkhomov, in my opinion, was inconclusive. And in light of the above information, we decided to seriously investigate how to get hold of some 62 nickel, and it costs $11,600 per gram. Natural nickel is only 3.6% of 62 nickel, so if you wanted to enhance the nickel, you could just use a very small amount of that 1 gram but I think it's more important than that. Is the reactor a breeder? I've got two more slides, I think, Patricia. Is the reactor a breeder? Because if 62 nickel is critical, can it be bred in situ? Natural nickel may breed very slowly because the cluster isn't all nickel, so some of the nickel may be just converting itself rather than stimulating reactions in the lithium, which would enable further conversion. So the big revelation, we were looking for nickel, and we were told that Rossi bought 98.4% enriched nickel from Trace Sciences about 3 years ago, whilst he was working with Sergio Figardi, and that was before the hot cap. He must have been experimenting with Figardi, 62 nickel, to understand how the ECAT reaction worked. We've also been told that a few years ago he was supplied 62 nickel by another party. 98.4%, the Lugano 62 nickel in the analyzed ash was 98.7% pure. I'd just like to thank the bunch of people you can see there, Francesco Celani for his braveness, Echo for helping me find the links to the material that you've just seen, and our sponsors and private donors, which are listed there.
Okay, Bob, thank you so very much.